This is Andrew Cardozo. I'm talking with Robert FALCON OUELETTE, who has been Member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre from 2015 to 2019.
Yes.
So, Robert, let me take you back to the beginning of your political career, if that's it. What got you into politics and why did you run in the 2015 election?
Well, I started out actually in 2014. I was a university professor at the University of Manitoba, and I was writing, studying the city of Winnipeg and the interactions between various social groups, and I found there was actually quite a bit of racism, quite a bit of corruption actually also in the city of Winnipeg. And I was complaining to a friend about it, and he said, "Well, quit complaining and do something about it." So I said, okay, well, and the person suggested to run for office. Now, I think they were suggesting that I run for city council or, a position like that. But I said, you know what, I don't see a lot of people who are putting forward some really big ideas about how we interact in the city of Winnipeg. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to run for mayor.
Right.
So I threw my hat in the ring. And actually, I asked 100 people, or around 100 people, if I should run, and I got response back from most of them, about 50% said I shouldn't run, another 50 said I should run, but I'm not going to win, and maybe one said, you can actually win. And at the end of the day, it was always just above the cut. I was just kind of getting through, because at first no one really wanted to take me seriously. But then they said, oh, well, he is a university professor, and then I was getting enough poll numbers to keep me in the game, as it would be, and I was invited to more and more debates. I did actually, in the end, 44 debates, and
wow.
I think it actually kind of changed the discourse about what actually happens in the city of Winnipeg, because there were a lot of policies put in place by the new mayor that I was advocating, and I'm happy to see that Brian Boven's doing very well and trying to advocate for a lot of things which I believe in. Then in 2015, I said to myself, well, after the election municipally was over, I said to myself, what should I do with my time? And I said I can go back to being a university professor, but the opportunity came up to actually run federally, and so I ran in a riding that I should never have won. That was supposedly a fortress, an NDP fortress. And I went out, worked very hard, and I was able to get the voter turnout up from around 45% to 61%, because the average over 20 years was around 45-49%.
Wow.
In that range.
Really?
And I got it up to 61,
yeah.
which was a huge turnout, and they voted for me. So it was a huge victory. It was a huge upset. I defeated, took over this place that, won. No one said I would have ever been able to win, and I proved everyone wrong, which was fantastic. And I was in Parliament for 4 years, a great privilege. I got to work extremely hard every day, advocate for things that I really thought were important, get to push my colleagues in the government, try and think about, I had the opportunity of thinking about what an MP is. Do we toe the party line? Do we be independent? What is my role? Am I the voice to Winnipeg, to my citizens, or am I the voice of my citizens to Ottawa, to the government? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about a lot of those theories and about what role I wanted to play, and I actually ended up deciding that I wanted to be actually the voice of the citizens to Ottawa. And I did push my colleagues. I often walked up to the line, I leaned over the line, and I never really crossed the line in a public way too much. I had very kind words to say, but often it was a very interesting juggling act that I was trying to embark on, trying to get things for one of the poorest ridings in the country. And I actually discovered that where you're from and who you represent is extremely important, because for instance, if you have a riding which is extremely middle class, upper middle class, you're going to talk about those needs most often with your colleagues. You're going to talk about the needs of your riding behind closed doors. But my riding, because it's such a poor riding and had been represented by an opposition party, had been kind of ignored. And so when a government policy came up that kind of seemed to have a consensus within the party I would come along and say, you know what? Actually, that policy that you're advocating is not going to benefit the people in my riding. So what are we actually going to do concretely to help out my citizens? And so it took a number of years of advocating behind closed doors, but we actually managed to get a lot of the policies changed. For more social housing, more programs that benefit the people who are poor, who aren't very wealthy in our country. And so I'm very proud of that work because it was offering a different vantage point within a caucus. Now, that is one of the things that I've learned about is what actually occurs. Like, I discovered, it's very easy to stand up in question period and yell very loudly, but most of the work actually happens behind closed doors.
So you were seen as fairly independent-minded, but a team player.
I try to be a team player, yeah.
So are you saying the team player was out front and behind closed doors you raised issues strongly?
Every time I would have the opportunity of getting the microphone and I would think about a government policy, the government loves to talk about the middle class, but often, my riding is not completely the middle class. It's a different riding. A lot of Indigenous peoples, a lot of people who are on social assistance, a lot of people who have, who are kind of the people who are often forgotten by our political systems. It is, for instance, a lot of visible minorities, people who aren't the richest, but people who have value, who have worth, who work extremely hard, and they need government programs to work for them as well. And so I would spend a lot of time trying to advocate for the citizens that I was representing. And when you think about government policy, people often look at it from their vantage point of who sent them there. They're not going to look at it and say, oh, you know what? I'm not going to come to Ottawa and say, oh, I need to fight for the people of Vancouver.
Right.
Because, one is I don't have very much contact with the people of Vancouver, though they're extremely important and valuable. The people I have to fight for when I was in Parliament was the people of Winnipeg Centre. Because all the other regions of the country have their own MP who should be fighting for them and trying to, ensure that their views are represented.
So just tell me a little bit about social housing. That's one of the things that came out in the last government. You were part of that. How did you go about pressing for that to happen?
Well, one, we need social housing. One, we need a lot of it in Winnipeg Centre. A lot of the housing is extremely poor quality. We can't also just rely completely on the government to come up with the solutions. We need to find ways of having programs that actually get money into people's hands to be able to afford housing. But we also had a problem in Manitoba in that the provincial government didn't want to invest very much in social housing. It's a conservative government. They were more interested, and it's their vantage point in controlling government spending at the provincial side.
Right.
And because of that, there was no matching provincial funds, so hence no spending in social housing into Manitoba and especially into Winnipeg Centre. So I had to spend my time advocating to the Minister of Families and Housing, Jean-Yves Duclos from Quebec City, trying to work with him to get changes in the Treasury Board to allow direct funding to groups on the ground. So instead of the 30, 33, 33, 33, or a third split, a 50-50 split with local groups. And so that's the co-investment fund, which was created, which addresses a lot of the needs. And so then after that fund was created, I was able to get, $25 billion for the University of Winnipeg Downtown Commons affordable housing project, the West Broadway affordable housing project of another $26 million. I was just before the election, I was working on a project with the Misericordia Foundation. It's a hospital which was developing an assisted living center for another $26 million of 97 units. These are the things that were actually for seniors. This is actually what was going to benefit the people in downtown Winnipeg. And so, one, ensuring that there's affordable, accessible, good quality housing. And so, you have to get the rules changed, and which is no small feat. And, as I said, it's, easy to stand up in question period and yell, but, I get to see the ministers every day and influence them and say, and their staff, which is actually what I also discovered is extremely important, is trying to find the right staff and having those meetings and discussing, hey, these are the issues that I am facing, and I need your assistance. And so, the minister would say, oh, could you speak with my, staff? And so I'd sit down with them and explain the problems that I'm facing, one at the provincial level, but also the funding issues that we're facing, and asking them, how do we actually get that program changed, and what can I do to assist you? And so, I'd have to sometimes I present a petition or use the rules of parliament and give a little speech and talk about my issues, make sure the minister's aware of that speech, and make sure his staff are aware of that speech and my needs, or I speak in caucus behind closed doors and, talk about it. And I remember one day in National Caucus saying, we're 2 years into our mandate and I haven't seen a single social housing unit built in my riding yet. Prime Minister, I need help. And, I didn't say it with a smile on my face, obviously, but I remember the Prime Minister...
So you did it with full dramatic flair.
As much as I possibly could, and I remember the Prime Minister speaking with the Minister of Housing, saying, how can you help Robert? And the Minister of Housing said, okay, we're almost there, Robert. We have been talking about this a long time. We're almost there, just give me a little bit. And then they announced the co-investment fund not long after. So, very proud of that work, and a lot goes into it. It's not simple snapping of fingers, get it done. It's actually a grind. It's not government doesn't turn on a dime as people like to see, because what we also discovered with government is because it's such a large institution, 250,000 people. There are rules and procedures, and accountability is extremely important. And if you change a program or create a program, you actually have to convince people at multiple levels why it's important. It goes through accountability and ensuring that this is not going to be a waste of funds, that it's going to address an actual need, that it's actually then, once the program is going, that it's not going to waste funds, that there's not going to be issues politically, that someone's going to announce, hey, these funds were thrown to the wind and they didn't deliver any results. These are the things which are extremely important to government, because it's important to Canadians that the government doesn't waste money. And so it takes time to get the government programs to move in the right direction. As it should be.
And do it in a responsible way.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we're going to take a short break and be back.